Wooing Boston. Taiwanese-American Michelle Wu makes history as the first woman and person of color elected mayor. Moves on methane. Over 100 countries pledge to slash emissions of the greenhouse gas. Another one bites the dust. Yahoo becomes the latest Western tech company to turn its back on China. And secrets of the masters. We find out the beauty of ancient Chinese painting lies in its artistic composition. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. The daughter of Taiwanese immigrants has made history as both the first woman and the first Asian American to be elected mayor of Boston. Michelle Wu won by a huge margin over her closest rival. She campaigned on progressive policies such as policing reforms, rent control, and environmental initiatives. 36-year-old Wu was born in Chicago shortly after her parents moved to the United States from Taiwan. In her victory speech, a few words in Mandarin drew loud applause. She said, "You can achieve anything." Wu's win is a dramatic turnaround for a city that nearly 50 years ago experienced one of the nation's most violent race riots. She told TaiwanPlus why it was significant to have an Asian American elected to this position.
It's an important part of who I am, and I look forward to making sure that Asian Americans across the country and across the city are represented in all levels of leadership and government.
Thank you.
Wu said she entered politics out of frustration over the obstacles her immigrant family faced. She laid out her vision of the city to her supporters.
From every corner of our city, Boston has spoken. We are ready to meet this moment. We are ready to become a Boston for everyone. We're ready to be a Boston that doesn't push people out, but welcomes all who call our city home. We're ready to be a Boston where all can afford to stay and to thrive.
Rick Glauert spoke to Ye Jieting, founder of Taiwan's Ketagalan Media, about the landmark win. He began by asking how Taiwanese Americans feel about the result.
I think it's a very good sign for Taiwanese Americans in general who wants to enter politics in the United States. I think it proves that people who are not shy about their Taiwanese heritage and not shy about their Asian American heritage can actually win major races across the country. As a symbolic win for Taiwanese Americans and also Taiwanese, I think it's it really paves the way for more young people who are Taiwanese Americans or even in Taiwan who are interested in politics and to wants to get involved.
And what does this mean for US-Taiwan relations?
The more Taiwanese Americans enter mainstream U.S. politics, right? The more sort of a chance you will have people who are who will make a difference in U.S.-Taiwan relations or who will make a difference in U.S. foreign policy. But even as on a bigger level, right? Having just more people talk about their heritage of Taiwan, having people just mention the word Taiwan more in mainstream American society, I think that creates more of an awareness for everybody involved, right? To pay attention to Taiwan, to just even be curious about what's going on in Taiwan, and to really think through. Okay, Taiwan is not just a concept. It's not an abstract sort of idea that foreign policy academics going to throw around. It is a place where people do come from. It's a place that has heritage. It's a place that people do call home.
Well, across the Atlantic, global leaders wrapped up their visit to the COP26 conference with an ambitious promise to tackle one of the biggest contributors to global warming. 6 of the world's 10 biggest methane emitters pledged to cut emissions 30% by 2030. But as Jaime Ocon reports, they failed to get commitments from Australia, China, Russia and India, leading to questions about whether the promises are all just hot air.
After the grand statements of opening day, all eyes were on American President Joe Biden in Glasgow to see whether he would deliver on new American leaderships and promises on climate change. Just as they were side by side on stage, the European Commission president and the U.S. leader were united in the pledge to cut methane emissions by 2030.
So together, we're committing to collectively reduce our methane by 30% by 2030, and I think we could probably go beyond that. We just announced this package at the General Assembly and back in September. At the time, as mentioned, 9 countries had signed on. Today, it's over 80. It's approaching 100 countries that are signing on.
The commitment is part of a global partnership involving more than 100 countries and is dubbed the Global Methane Pledge. But the initiative to cut one of the most potent greenhouse gases by 30% is not legally binding. Methane is mostly emitted from human activities and is a large contributor to global warming. The United States has been facing intense pressure as historically it has pumped the most greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. While the United States says it's stepping up to its responsibilities, other major polluters, including Australia, China, India, and Russia, have not joined the partnership.
We showed up. And by showing up, we've had a profound impact on the way I think the rest of the world is looking at the United States and its leadership role.
President Biden chastised China and Russia, whose leaders are not in Glasgow.
I think it's been a big mistake, quite frankly, for China, with respect to China not showing up. The rest of the world is going to look to China and say, what value added are they providing? And they've lost an ability to influence people around the world and all the people here at COP. The same way I would argue with regard to Russia.
As Biden and other world leaders continue their discussions, important goals remain elusive. The main target of net zero carbon emissions globally has not been reached. Without it, experts say that the world is set for a future of rising temperatures and a continuation of the lethal fires, floods, droughts, and heat waves seen in recent years. But UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson struck a cautiously optimistic tone in his closing speech.
On the way to the G20 in Rome, I said to some of you on the plane that if this was a football match, then the current score would be 5-1 down in the match between humanity and climate change. And I think what you could say today, after 2 days of talks with around 120 world leaders, is that we've pulled back a goal, or perhaps even 2. And I think we're going to be able to take this thing to extra time, because there's no doubt that some progress has been made.
But extra time is something that struggling ecosystems and many countries might not have. Kama Xu and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
While Taiwan is not officially represented at COP26, the country's main political parties are both sending delegations. Bing Wang spoke to opposition Kuomintang lawmaker Hong Meng-kai about what he's hoping to achieve at the summit.
最主要，我觉得在这一次去有3个重点啊。第一，就是我们跟世界接轨，我们也传达了，就之前我们在气候变迁这一件事情上面，台湾不会缺席，中华民国也会很务实的态度。我们希望在气候变迁法上面，我们国内自己立法，就把2050年净零碳排也要纳入法案。虽然现在还没有完全的修法通过，可是蔡英文总统也已经宣示了。我想我们又去表达台湾在这件事情上面绝对不会缺席，我们是地球上的一份子。第二，我想也是希望透过这样的一个大会，跟大家一起互相的结合。虽然说台湾目前没有办法以正式的身份去参与这个会议，但是我们把握每一个跟国际友人接轨以及发声的机会。那以及第3个目的就是，我们也希望 听一听现在各国对于气候变迁，除了2050净零碳排，它是一个世界上看起来大家的一个目标跟方向，但是具体是怎么做更重要。现在是2020年，还有30年的一个时间，怎么样在这30年里面有计划跟阶段性的逐步去达成2050的净零碳排？
Is there a consensus across the political spectrum on environmental issues?
台湾只有一个，地球只有一个，我们就生活在这个土地上面，所以我觉得党派一定有党派各自的立场，但是对于环境跟对于土地的永续经营发展，我觉得是不变的。这一点也是我认为说，其实在气候变迁的议题上面，为什么联合国的气候变迁大会可以吸引世界各国大家共同参与，就是国与国之间的争议是一回事，但是对于全体人类在气候议题上面的永续经营是大家共同的课题。
What is the KMT's agenda on addressing climate change, and are there any legislation that you push out yourself?
确实，到目前为止，我们的环保署以及行政院并还没有把完整的官方版的气候变迁法到底修法草案是长什么样子。政府让我们感觉到它是一个单一部会的事情，但我们要说，其实气候变迁这样的议题不是只有环保署的事，环保署只是做一个监控，跟环保署只是做一个就是目标。可是真的要达成2050净零碳排，其实要各部会，经济部有经济部相关的业务，交通部交通工具电动车怎么样大幅上升，怎么样减少燃油车，经济部怎么样发电能够来能源的部分能够来降低碳排，以及各部会，包括公共工程委员会，我们国内公共工程委员会，它的公共建筑里面是不是有放入所谓的零碳建筑这样的一个概念？国民党其实我们国民党在这个气候变迁法里面几个关键，譬如说包括2050净零碳排，我们把它给确认。那并且我的版本里面有加入，就是2030、2040有 checkpoint， 就可能2030需要降低到多少，2040降低到多少，2050是0。
Taiwan's military plans to expand combat training for the country's reserve forces. The military next year will call up an estimated 10,000 reservists for 2 weeks for more intensified combat training sessions. At present, reservists are called up for just 5 to 7 days at a time. There are about 2.3 million reserve soldiers in Taiwan, where all eligible adult males undergo basic training. Service members discharged within the last 8 years may be called back for training first. The military wants to ensure that reservists can reliably back up regular forces as China steps up military maneuvers around Taiwan. The first ever formal delegation from the European Parliament has arrived in Taiwan for a 3-day visit. The group includes 13 members of the Special Committee on Foreign Interference in all democratic processes. They will discuss Taiwan's experiences in protecting its democracy against disinformation campaigns and cyber attacks. They are set to meet President Tsai Ing-wen and other officials. The visit comes shortly after the European Parliament passed its first ever report on Taiwan, urging for closer economic ties. Yahoo has announced its withdrawal from China amid an ongoing crackdown on tech companies. The US firm announced on its website that its services are no longer available from this week. They blamed what they called the increasingly challenging business and legal environment in China. The move coincides with the introduction of a new data protection law requiring companies to hand over user data if requested by authorities. Yahoo has faced criticism in the past for cooperating with the Chinese government in the arrest and imprisonment of journalists and dissidents.
I think it's just in the content space, it's pretty clear that the Chinese government is not going to allow U.S. companies to operate in that space without heavy censorship and without heavy scrutiny of data, the kind of data they would be collecting, for example. And so therefore, those companies most of them have decided to to scale back or pull out entirely because that space they don't see any hope for that space getting better in the near term.
Coming up after the break, another dark day for freedom of speech in Hong Kong. Jimmy Lai is on trial for attending last year's Tiananmen Square vigil. We get analysis of the case. Stay with us.
最有人情味的地方。
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. A reminder of our top story. Michelle Wu, the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants, is going down in history as both the first woman and the first Asian American to be elected mayor of Boston. Taiwan is hoping to use this year's APEC Leaders Summit to push for its bid to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CPTPP. President Tsai Ing-wen on Tuesday said TSMC founder Morris Chang would once again represent the nation when APEC meets in New Zealand in December. It's the 5th time Chang will attend APEC as Tsai's envoy. Pressure from China prevents Taiwan's president from attending. Tsai has tasked Chang with finding backing for Taiwan's entry into the 11-nation Pacific Rim trade bloc, the CPTPP.
CPTPP 将可以促进成员之间的产业连结，强化区域的经济安全。因此，我要请我们张领袖代表借由这次的会议，争取更多 APEC 成员支持台湾加入。
Media tycoon and prominent pro-democracy advocate Jimmy Lai is among a group of activists facing trial in Hong Kong this week for rallying on June 4th. He and 7 others are accused of incitement to knowingly take part in an unauthorized assembly by participating in last year's candlelight vigil to mark the Tiananmen Square massacre. Authorities banned the event for the first time in decades, citing coronavirus concerns. While most of the defendants have pleaded guilty, Lai is fighting the charges along with the former journalist Gwyneth Ho and barrister Chow Hang Tong. The trio are also facing charges under the national security law. To learn more about the trial and its implications, our reporter Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick spoke with legal scholar Alvin Y.H. Chung. He asked whether these charges, which are not under the national security law, should be seen as part of the same crackdown.
Absolutely. A lot of attention has been placed on the NSL, and quite rightly, because there is a lot that is wrong with it. But the NSL may be more significant in setting the tone for how other areas of law will be used. And here I'm not just talking about criminal law, the public order ordinance and so on. I'm talking about how government-owned landlords are going to decide to renew and not renew leases with certain politically troublesome tenants like the Apple Daily or Foreign Correspondents Club. I'm talking about things like administrative decisions on provision of government services. What we're seeing now is the NSL has set the climate under which all law and administration will henceforth be applied. It is very much a case of, for my friends anything, for my enemies the law.
The presiding judge in this case is a British national who has come under a lot of scrutiny and criticism in the past for jailing of dissidents. In your opinion, should we be looking at and criticizing the judges in these cases or something else?
Some of the judges have rightly come in for a great deal of criticism. Criminal law judges in the lower courts tend to have risen through the ranks of the Department of Justice, and some of them seem to be unbelievable that they're still doing their previous job. That brings me to the other part of the equation, which is the role that the Department of Justice Prosecutions Division plays. Because at the end of the day, it isn't the judge that makes the decision on what charges to bring and which court to bring them in. It's the prosecutors. And those decisions are made in black box with no meaningful prospect of review. So the prosecution should come in for its share of the blame here as well. The judiciary is desperately trying to split the baby and please both sides, and failing spectacularly at that effort. And the prosecution is acting in a way that quite clearly has nothing to do with the public interest.
Dozens have been killed in an explosion at Afghanistan's largest military hospital in Kabul. The attack on Tuesday also left more than 50 injured. Local media quoted eyewitnesses saying they heard gunfire as the explosions and saw a number of fighters entering the hospital. In footage posted to social media, plumes of smoke can be seen rising from the building in the heart of the city. An affiliate of the Islamic State group, ISIS-K, has claimed responsibility for the attack. Islamic State has launched a number of attacks since the Taliban regained control of the country earlier this year. Meta, Facebook's newly named parent company, announced on Tuesday that it will shut down its facial recognition services by December as it seeks to, quote, find the right balance with the technology. The company announced that it will delete facial scan data and templates from over 1 billion people. This information is currently used to automatically identify users in photos and videos uploaded to Meta's services. In the US, the Centers for Disease Control has approved the Pfizer vaccine for emergency use in children aged 5 to 11. Clinical trials show a 1/3 dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine gives 90% protection against symptomatic disease in this age group. The company believes a smaller dose will reduce potential side effects. The move means 28 million children in the US are now eligible for a jab. The White House says the vaccination program will hit full speed next week. Art is subjective. You either like a piece of work or you don't, and often we don't know why. But for masters of their craft, a piece's composition can make all the difference.
构成也有称为是所谓的构图。我们在日常生活当中，很多的时候我们运用到所谓的构图，在音乐里面有讲所谓的作曲，其实都跟构图有关系。所以基本上它就是一种安排。这个安排就是让所有要处理的元素，让它纳出一个系统、一种关系的存在。
老房子它上面都会有这个窗花的设计的意象，那它采用的构成方式就是用反复还有对称的一个构图的方法。
大部分的艺术家看到了美好的山水景致，要如何把它浓缩、凝聚、构思，成为一幅好的作品？大部分所采取的就是面对大山。 面对大景，所以直接可以看到主题凸显。
范宽的西山行李图最大的特色，可能被大家津津乐道的，就是它的构图。它是用一个巨碑式的方式来构图。那这个巨碑式是一个。 非常壮阔的一种效果，它是中间鼎立的哈，那占的画面大概有2/3的面积，那这个3/4的面积可以让我们感受到一种非常雄伟、会很大的气势，那也会达到很震撼的视觉效果。那它的构成大概是分前景、中景跟后景。 那这样一个渐层上去会让我们一直往上高耸。就我们中国传统水墨画的3元法的构图来讲，那它是属于一种高原式的构图方式啊。
在传统的绘画理论，有所谓的谢赫6法，有一点叫做一法叫做经营位置。 所以，经营位置是所有艺术家在进行创作的时候一个非常前置作业要考量的。 你感受到哦，这是一件很不错的作品的同时，其实你在细看，你可以看得到艺术家透过他非常精湛的技法，把前景、中景巧妙地表现出30的纹理。
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. We leave you with footage of the world's largest and highest Ferris wheel in Dubai. Check out the TaiwanPlus News app, YouTube and website for this show and more. Stay safe and see you next time.